The goal for this video is to talk about types of neurons and the basic structure of the human nervous system. So we've already learned all about the neuron itself, the neuron being the building block of the nervous system, and now it's time to talk about the different types. Sensory or afferent neurons carry messages from our sensory receptors, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our skin, towards the central nervous system. Okay, so sensory meaning they take information from our senses, carry those messages to the brain, where we're then able to sense. We learn about that in our next chapter. Whereas motor neurons or efferent neurons, motor is referring to movement, carry messages from the central nervous system, from the brain and spinal cord, out towards our muscles and our glands. Interneurons make up most of our central nervous system. So our central nervous system is our brain and our spinal cord. Touch your head right now. Now, touch where your spinal cord is. It runs down the center of your body. This is your central nervous system. So from your brain out, signals travel along motor neurons, but connecting the sensory and the motor neurons in the central nervous system are interneurons. The acronym that we use is SAME. Sensory afferent, motor efferent, because you never know when you're going to need to know the difference. A question might refer to afferent neurons without using the word sensory, so you have to remember afferent. Okay, afferent is sensory, and SAME goes with motor or efferent. So SAME is a really great acronym for remembering: sensory, afferent, motor, efferent. Here's a little diagram kind of explaining sensory, inter, and motor neurons. So this person is looking at this glass of water. They're able to see the water using sensory receptor cells that are located in their retina. There are specialized neurons in your retina, which is the back of your eye, that take in information from your surroundings, take in light energy, and fire action potentials, which we've learned about. Those action potentials then travel along a path to our occipital lobe, where our vision is processed. It's right back here, our visual cortex. Okay? So that sensory information that allows him to see the glass of water travels along sensory neurons to the brain. Remember, the brain, which is part of the central nervous system, as well as the spinal cord, are made up of interneurons. This person sees the glass, decides they're going to pick the glass up. Well, now they need to actually move their arm. So the sensory signal that sees the glass has reached the brain. Visual information has been processed. Now there's another part of the brain called the motor cortex right around here, responsible for our voluntary movement, that needs to send a signal out through the spinal cord to the muscles so that they're able to reach out their hand, pick up the glass, and drink from it. And that kind of motor output coming from the brain is going to travel along motor or efferent neurons. So again, sensory input comes in this case, through the eyes, through sensory neurons, to the central nervous system, which is made up of interneurons. Motor output, the ability to use the muscles to pick up the glass, that's the responsibility of our motor or efferent neurons. The exception to what we're talking about right now is a simple reflex. So you've been to the doctor, they've tested your reflexes. Simple reflexes only involve the spinal cord. Movement happens before information is able to reach the brain. So back here, right, we talked about the sensory information reaching the brain. That doesn't happen with a simple reflex. The example here is if you were to touch your finger to a candle flame, you would jerk your hand back so quickly that the signal doesn't even have time to reach the brain. Okay, it's only reaching the spinal cord. Sensory information is being sent to the spinal cord, and then the motor information that tells you, hey, got to move that hand, comes out from the spinal cord as well. So a simple reflex is an exception to the water example that we used a minute ago. So the organization of the nervous system. The nervous system is organized into two major divisions. The central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, like I was saying a second ago. It's easy to remember because it runs down the center of your body, your brain, and your spinal cord. And then the peripheral nervous system, which connects the brain and the spinal cord to your body. All right, so like wiggle your arms, move your legs around. Those functions are functions of your peripheral nervous system, the part of your nervous system that branches out from your central nervous system. Now, your brain and your spinal cord are going to send signals out to the peripheral nervous system that allow you to perform both your voluntary and involuntary functions. So we'll start with voluntary functions. The somatic division of the peripheral nervous system connects your sense organs to your brain. So back at the glass of water example, like the ability to see, that sensory information coming in, that's a function of your somatic nervous system, as is any of your voluntary movement. So even the picking up the glass in order to drink it, these are all functions of your somatic nervous system. The autonomic division of the peripheral nervous system is responsible for all of your automatic functions. Autonomic, think automatic. It's a good way to remember it. The autonomic nervous system is responsible for all of your homeostatic physiological functions, your digestion, respiration, heart rate, arousal, meaning your fight or flight response. And that brings me to the final subdivision, which is your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system arouses you, right? It's your fight or flight response. I see something scary. We've all been in that scenario. It's out of our control. All of a sudden, our heart is racing. Our palms are sweating. That's a function of your sympathetic nervous system. I like to think of it if I'm in a scary situation, my sympathetic nervous system is sympathetic to me in that moment and is going to gear me up to deal with that threat, which is my fight or flight response. The other subdivision of the autonomic nervous system is called the parasympathetic nervous system. This acts always in opposition to the sympathetic. It puts the brakes on. It brings us back to normal. It calms us. It slows the heart rate, slows respiration. All right? And a little mnemonic you can use for this, whereas the sympathetic arouses, the parasympathetic, like a parachute, brings you down. So these are just some of the functions of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that you are responsible for. If you were to ever see either of these terms on a free response question, if you had to apply the sympathetic nervous system to a scenario, it's not enough to just say the sympathetic nervous system arouses the body. Nope, you've got to list an actual physiological response. You've got to say the sympathetic nervous system arouses the body by dilating the pupils, accelerating the heart rate, inhibiting digestion. Think about this. When you're in a scary situation, when your body needs to prep to fight or flee, digestion halts so that blood flow can be diverted to your extremities. So we see a halt in digestion. Over here, parasympathetic nervous system just performs all of the opposite functions. It contracts the pupils, slows the heart rate, resumes or stimulates digestion. And that's it. I will tell you that on the AP exam, they love to ask you about the autonomic nervous system and its divisions, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. This is also something that comes up later in the year, so it's really, really important that we nail this down as much as we can now.